Let's get into it now. Joining me, Sky News host James Morrow and journalist at the Daily Telegraph, James Willis. Gents, welcome. Let's start with the growing concerns about asbestos in wind turbines. The Queensland government's now ordered an audit of all wind farms in the state after Andrew Forrest's Clarke Creek wind farm became the third in the nation to detect asbestos in and around the turbines. Now, surely the rest of the country must follow this audit. I'd like to see, James, that they're all shut down pending a clear bill of health. And I have to say, where are all the Labor sort of class action law firms here? None of them are speaking out. And we're talking about asbestos now in multiple locations.
Yeah, indeed, Peter. And I think that the real problem with all these renewable energy projects that we're seeing right across the country is that once they're up and running, the checks and balances basically go away. And that's obviously where farmers have been left worried about what happens with decommissioning when they have to come down in 10, 20 years from now. But I think this is deeply alarming. Now, the New South Wales opposition has this afternoon told us that they're calling for an immediate audit of all the hundreds of turbines. I think there's 900 in New South Wales alone that are up and running. And you'd think it'd be a pretty basic check. Now, all these projects, in theory, have at least a handful of workers that are there for maintenance. Well, Safe Work's got to go in. They've got to go into all these sites and make sure that they are guaranteed. I mean, Labor governments don't take second chances with this, and nor they should when it comes to the protection of workers, and they make a big fuss about showing that they are about worker safety. Well, if there are parts of wind turbines that have been detected with asbestos and there are concerns about other sites, out of an abundance of caution, we should be checking all of them. And if it doesn't happen, it's another clear example of where these guys are just blinded by trying to get to net zero and nothing else really matters. And the checks and balances that would go into any government project at any time are not happening here in the name of net zero, which is just a joke if it is the case.
It'll be very interesting because a lot of the states, as you know, have industrial manslaughter laws, and it could be government departments and officials who this time are on the hook. Let's go to comments from the climate czar, Labor's climate czar, I might add, Matt Kean. He's taken aim at the Liberal Party in a piece for Clarke today, arguing that they deserve to keep losing, he says, until they decide to change course and get back to net zero by 2050. James Morrow, I mean, this is an extraordinary broadside. The former New South Wales Liberal deputy leader there, of course, former treasurer, the bloke who wanted to shut down the coal-fired power station that Labor have had to keep going to keep the lights on in your state. He still thinks he's got factional control. You'll tell me if he does or he doesn't. But, I mean, this is extraordinary what he's done today.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, he's put it out there in crikey, so I don't know how much impact the thing is actually going to have. It is funny, though. I mean, Matt Kean, as you say, not only everything you've mentioned, but he's saddled New South Wales with these renewable energy zones, which are costing an absolute fortune, are tearing apart bush communities from one end of the state to the other, as farmers are seeing their land degraded for solar farms and wind turbines and transmission lines and all that sort of thing. But, I read this piece, Peter, and the thing that came to my mind is, well, he would say this, wouldn't he? He's the head of the Climate Change Authority. He's also a director of a renewable energy investment fund. So, this is what he does. But this whole idea that he puts forward in the piece, that there's this kind of historic inevitability, the arc of history bends towards climate change, as Barack Obama might have put it. Well, it's a nonsense. He's acting like the Liberals are the ones who are...
He's supposed to be an independent chair.
He is supposed to be independent, but, he's acting like this is some inevitability when he's ignored, and that the Liberals are being left behind, but he's the one, Peter, being left behind here because the rest of the world is looking at this whole idea of net zero by 2050, realizing it's a disaster, changing policy as much as they can in Europe, elsewhere around the world. The idea that Australia, that Labor, that Matt Kean is still wedded to this idea of net zero by 2050, like it's physically or economically possible without it being an economic disaster, he is the one who is going to wind up looking like the dinosaur.
Let's stay with this issue, James. Go to revelations in your newspaper, the Daily Telegraph today, that at least 5 foreign governments have got their noses in the trough of taxpayer money. This is in Chris Bowen's capacity investment scheme. So it's a fund to back in renewable projects. We were told at some stage that they're all about backing Australian jobs in renewables. We don't believe that. You've uncovered that a subsidiary of EDP Global has received backing for 2 projects under this Bowen scheme. And according to the Daily Telegraph, the largest shareholder in EDP Global is China Three Gorges. That's a company that's controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. James, what more can you tell us?
Well, and to be honest, Peter, this is Belt and Road by stealth, one way or another, and these are not the only projects that we've uncovered that have links to companies that are owned by the Chinese government. And for people that don't understand, or national security experts say that if a company is owned by the Chinese government, it can be controlled by the Chinese government. And so what China has done very strategically here, keeping in mind everything you said in your editorial off the top, is basically circumnavigate any of the normal checks. And there's companies that are set up in Australia, or they're overseas companies. China invests in them directly, or they provide them loans, or they provide them equipment for these large-scale projects, and they've managed to get their way onto the capacity investment scheme, as has a company owned by the Malaysian government, as have international superannuation funds. And what taxpayers are funding is 60 of these projects right across the country, where the government, or you and I, will basically underwrite them for at least 15 years. And what happens is, if they lose money, we will underwrite part of the cost. If they earn money above an agreed revenue ceiling, they'll have to pay some of that back. But it's the deal of the century. It applies to 60 projects. International governments and companies have realised this, and they've all hitched their wagon to Chris Bowen's scheme. And the worst part about it is it only applies to green energy. Now, as we both know, we desperately need more gas in this country. There'd be an argument to put gas onto this as well. Doesn't apply. It's green energy, wind, solar, battery only. And if you're good enough to get involved, I'll tell you what, Peter, it's going to be the deal of a lifetime for the next 15 years or more.
It's like that horrible pink bat scheme of the Rudd Gillard era on steroids. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars here.
And we don't know. We don't know how much. It's all commercial in confidence, Peter.
No, that is exactly right. You were right to make that point. We know it's billions. We don't know how many billions, because Chris Bowen, like everything, is not giving us the financial detail. I'll go back to those left-wing Liberals. I like to call themselves moderates, James. Let's call them what they are. They've now said they're going to go to war over migration, right? Andrew Bragg, you remember, said, if net zero happens, I'm going to quit. Well, he hasn't quit, unfortunately, for poor old Liberal supporters. He's still there. Now he's saying a new red line in the sand. If they go down the path of migration, cutting overseas migration, they'll be held to pay over my dead body. Well, today you've got a report out from the Institute of Public Affairs warning that mass migration is driving a huge decline in our per capita economic growth. So Bragg's a clown. He threatened to quit before, or he didn't. He's still there. I'd love to see him go anyway. But what do you make of his new red line?
Well, I just think it's ridiculous here. I mean, there's so many problems with his position. The first of all being, moderates say, we have to meet the voters where they are, to change our positions to meet the voters where they are. Well, on this, voters across the political spectrum think migration is too high. They want cuts. If the Liberals wanted an issue that would be really popular and start to win them back voters, this would be it. And it would be something that would win them voters in the inner cities and in the suburbs, where people are really concerned about their ability to buy a house or pay the rent, and they're about their kids' ability to buy a house or pay the rent, because there is no getting around the fact that the massive migration intake under this government here has absolutely pumped up the housing market. Everybody says that, particularly in rents. Today we had the ABS release their figures, too, about the economy. Well, they said, the economy's grown a bit to GDP, but per capita GDP has not grown one bit, because the ABS said this because of population growth, i.e. migration. This is the key number one issue right now, because we are seeing the economy being shallowed out, capacity being shallowed out by this massive influx of people. Only, I think, about 12% of them are actually skilled. A lot of them are here on these dodgy training college sort of migration agency sort of bridging visas. But this is a massive, massive issue for the Liberals not to jump on this. And yet we hear not only Andrew Bragg, but other moderates, Peta, they're saying in the party room, oh, we don't want to use the phrase even mass migration because that might be demonizing. Well, that's what it is, though. And you need to call things what they are. And I'm afraid, you know, the moderates, they really feel like they don't want to actually win.
We've got to call things what they are. That's why they are left-wing Liberals. James, we'll leave it there. James squared tonight. Thank you, gentlemen.